nearly 16 million jobs that have been created in this country since President Biden came into office. It's the most jobs created under any president in that same amount of time in history. It's not just a statistic. It's, 16 million people. It's millions of families. It's communities that are uplifted by a good job. And it's people really seeing themselves in opportunities that did not exist before.
Hello, and welcome to the PoliticsGirl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Well, the summer is over. The kids are back at school, and we've just celebrated Labor Day. So I thought, who better than someone who knows about labor, and who could know more about labor than acting U.S. Secretary of Labor, Julie Su. Previously the Deputy Secretary of Labor, Julie Su became Acting Secretary of Labor in March 2023. A nationally recognized expert on workers' rights and civil rights who dedicated her legal career to advancing justice on behalf of the poor and disenfranchised. Before joining the U.S. Department of Labor, Acting Secretary Su served as Secretary for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, enforcing workplace laws, combating wage theft, ensuring health and safety of workers on the job, as well as administering unemployment, workers' comp, and dealing with paid family leave. Acting Secretary Su was also the California Labor Commissioner for 7 years, making sure the workplace was both fair for employers and employees. Along with all the experience she brings to the job, Acting Secretary Su has also been named to every top lawyer list across the country, as well as being a recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant. A professor at UCLA Law School and Northeastern, Acting Secretary Su is a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law School and is fluent in English, Mandarin, and Spanish. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, super lawyer, labor expert, and Acting Secretary of the United States Department of Labor, Julie Su. Welcome, Secretary.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
Oh, well, thank you for joining me. Right off the jump, please tell people the difference between the Secretary of Labor and the Acting Secretary of Labor, because I don't think most people understand the distinction.
Well, it's really more technical than anything else, but I was really privileged to be nominated by the president to serve on his cabinet, something I never imagined for myself. In fact, when I told President Biden that my immigrant parents would never have thought that their daughter could serve in the cabinet of a United States president, he said, let's give them a call. And so he called to tell them directly. But the cabinet does require confirmation by the Senate, and I have not actually been confirmed. I was confirmed as the deputy secretary in 2021 and then nominated for this position in 2023. But in order to deliver on this administration's commitment to working people, we need a strong Secretary of Labor. We need a strong Department of Labor. And so that's what we've been working hard at every day that we're here.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So it just hasn't gone straight through. Your current position hasn't gone straight through the Senate confirmations yet. And we know that our Senate is quite dysfunctional. So that makes quite a lot of sense. One of the things I come back to all the time is how much people don't know about our government. Not just how it works, but what it's responsible for, what the departments do. It's amazing how many of us don't know that our federal government isn't just out there collecting taxes and avoiding terrorism for us. It's things like food safety and making sure our planes don't fall out of the air, and it's clean drinking water and the quality of our highways. It's the responsibility of keeping all of us safe from diseases. There's just so many aspects of the government. And I actually said when I had the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services, Admiral Rachel Levine, on the show in June, both to celebrate Pride and also to explain to people what that department of our government was responsible for. So many people wrote me to say they had no idea how expansive the HHS mandate really was. They just didn't know that the government was out there really trying to keep them safe. So with that in mind, would you please tell us what the Department of Labor is responsible for, what your team is caring about, and what you guys are working on right now?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because you're right. A lot of people don't know, and that's partly our responsibility, right, as those of us in government. But it's also that there's so many things that we do that affect day-to-day life that people just don't think about, right? So I say that our job is to look out for working people across America. It's to make sure that working people get a just day's pay for a hard day's work. It's to make sure that every worker comes home healthy and safe at the end of the workday. And we do investigations and enforce labor laws to do that. We also make sure that everybody who wants a good job can get a good job. So we connect people to opportunity, making sure that our educational systems align with the needs of employers. We have a whole bunch of programs that help to give young people people, people with disabilities, veterans, a chance, a shot at a program that's going to land them in a job that's going to help them lead a secure life and be able to retire with dignity. We support workers' right to organize, making sure that workers can have a real voice on the job. And, under this president and this vice president, who have said repeatedly that they're going to be the most pro-worker, pro-union administration this country has ever seen, we've helped to support workers at the bargaining table win historic wage gains and benefits and retirement security. And then we also, we know that sometimes there are too many workplaces where working people just aren't getting the basic protections that they're entitled to. So we combat child labor, for example, 13-year-olds who are working in factories using heavy equipment that's really dangerous to them, 16-year-olds working on roofs, doing construction work, things that they shouldn't be doing because it's not safe for them and it's against the law. We enforce those kinds of laws too. And then one other thing that a lot of people I think don't know is that we make sure that when you have health benefits, that those health benefits cover mental health and the things that you really need, even though sometimes your insurance carrier might tell you that it doesn't. We try to protect the rights of all people to get all the benefits under their health insurance that they're entitled to.
Well, that's fabulous. I mean, so essentially the Department of Labor is serving America's workers, its job seekers, but also its retirees, and then the health and welfare of the people who are working people in America. And I just want to tell people, under the Department of Labor, we have the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, we have the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, we have the Job Corps, which is for young people and finding jobs, we have Mine Safety and Health Administration, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, which most people know as OSHA, which is like keeping you safe in your job, the Office of the Chief Information Officer, the Office of the Inspector General, Veterans Employment and Training Services, and then entire divisions devoted to wages and hours, women, and the Office of Disability. And so that's a lot, right? Like it's all types of workers in all stage of their work life, getting a job, having a job, training for a new job, and then what comes after that job. You guys even have migrantworker.gov, which is a free resource workplace for all of our migrant workers, of which we know we have many in this country. And that particular website is in Arabic and Chinese and English and Haitian and Creole and Portuguese and all these other languages. And I think it's important that we recognize that there are people from all different countries and walks of life that work here in America. And we want to make sure that we understand that their rights are not being taken advantage of either. I think that's important. Now, we just celebrated Labor Day yesterday in America. So happy Labor Day to you,
Happy
Secretary
Labor Day.
Sue. But please talk to me a little bit about why you see Labor Day as an important holiday in America.
Well, Labor Day is the federal holiday in which we celebrate the working people of this country.
Yes.
It's a holiday because working people organized and advocated for it. And so it's a moment for us to really pause and acknowledge that, working people built this country, that working people keep things going, that they fix roads and bridges, right? They every single thing that we do, whether it's from our health to our airports, whether it's, when we travel and they work in hotels to, teachers, right? Working people are so essential to all of our lives. And it's a day to really celebrate them. It's also a day to acknowledge the important role that unions have played in building the country that we have, in building the middle class. Again, some things that we take for granted, right? The 40-hour work week, right? The weekend. Those are things that people had to organize for, and unions really helped to make that possible. And so it's also a day for us to say thank you to unions.
Yeah. And just so people know, Labor Day started in the late 1800s. It was kind of a way to, as Secretary Sue is saying, honor and recognize the American labor movement and the contributions the workers of America were making to the development and achievements of America as a whole. As trade unions and labor movements were growing in America, unionists themselves decided that a day should be put aside to celebrate work. And Labor Day was promoted by the Central Labor Union and the Knights of Labor in New York, who organized the very first parade there in 1882. And then in 1887, Oregon became the first state in the U.S. to make the day, which is the first Monday in September, an official public holiday. And then Labor Day became an official federal holiday in 1894. So this really has been a big thing all the way along. And it is very important to recognize that this country was built on the backs of American citizens putting in the daily's work. And we have things like you're saying, the weekend and the 8-hour workday and then paying overtime and this kind of thing because we respect the workers of America. And we want to continue to do that and grow that, which is why it's important that we're talking about, say, the Biden administration being the most pro-labor administration in the history of this country, because that is an important aspect for the president to say, I'm going to look out for the workers of America. President Biden was the very first president to ever join a picket line with union workers. So looking at the actions of the past 4 years in this administration, it's quite clear that the Department of Labor has been working really hard to beef up protections for American workers. Can you tell me some of the things you're most proud of from this administration?
Yeah, definitely. So we have been really focused on what I call, building the high road to the American dream, making sure that everybody who wants a good job can get one, and making sure that all jobs are something that an individual can make a decent living, know that they're going to go home healthy and safe at the end of the workday. And at the end of that workday, feel a little bit of what the president calls breathing room, right? To be able to know that you're not just scraping by, but you're able to get ahead. I call that, creating an opportunity infrastructure in this country. And this president and vice president are making investments in this country's infrastructure like never before, in fixing roads and bridges, in modernizing airports, in making sure that every family who turns on the faucet has clean drinking water, in making sure that every community has access to high-speed, reliable internet, right? A ton of investments in our clean climate, right, through clean energy, a lot of, focusing on manufacturing things in the United States again. All of those are opportunities to create good jobs in every single community. And so much of what I'm proud of us doing is the nearly 16 million jobs that have been created in this country since President Biden came into office. It's the most jobs created under any president in that same amount of time in history. It's not just a statistic. It's, 16 million people. It's millions of families. It's communities that are uplifted by a good job. And it's people really seeing themselves in opportunities that did not exist before. And so we're really proud of the work we're doing to create a real pathway for individuals to true economic security and the dignity that comes with work. But at the same time, we can't pave the high road if we don't combat the low road. And that means that we also have to end exploitation of working people. We have to end the situation where, workers go to work and then they're not paid for the work that they did, or they work really long hours and they're denied overtime. And so our enforcement work has been very important as well, just to put that just days pay into workers' pockets, to say to employers who are playing by the rules, we're looking out for you too, right? There should be a level playing field for you. We're talking about child labor in this country, again, in part because we've seen a dramatic rise, but also because we're doing our jobs. We're exposing practices where some companies have decided as a business model to hire vulnerable young people who they feel can't speak up, can't defend themselves, and aren't going to say, hey, I deserve better. And that's a really important role that we play too, is to come in and say, you do deserve better. We're on your side. We're going to protect you, and to really challenge and put a stop to those practices.
Yeah. And how do you deal with states that are allowing that to happen? Like states like Arkansas that are, you've got Sarah Huckabee Sanders surrounded by children that honestly looked morose. It felt like a Dickens novel as she signed this bill to get them back into the factories. And then you contrast that with someone like Tim Walz's governorship, where he's signing it to give them free lunches in school so they can have their healthy brains to learn. And I think, good grief, like that is a real dichotomy between those two states. And, we do have states' rights here, obviously, but we also have supremacy clause. So what is the federal government doing when it looks at states that are passing these laws that allow children to be working through the night?
Right. I mean, the thing about labor laws in this country is the federal law really provides a floor, right? It is basically saying we're not going to require or allow anyone to live and work beneath a certain level. That's what our minimum wage laws provide. That's what our child labor laws provide. And states can enact higher protections, and many have, right? Over half of our states in this country have a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage because people acknowledge that the federal minimum wage is basically still a poverty wage. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a floor, though, and you can't go beneath that. And so, I mean, how you described the efforts to roll back child labor protections is unconscionable. It's horrific, especially when you sit where I sit and you see that like 16-year-olds are dying on the job, a job that they should not be having to do anyway, right? It's like, punishing people for being poor. So we continue to send a clear message out that we are going to enforce the federal laws no matter what. A similar analogy can be made when it comes to heat, right? We are now seeing just record temperatures everywhere. And heat for working people is not just a discomfort. It's not just an inconvenience. It can be an occupational hazard. And despite that, there's never been a nationwide standard to protect workers from heat until now. It's something that we've proposed that we believe is common sense and basic. Too many workers are dying on the job of things that are totally preventable, right? Allowing workers to have some cool water, some shade, time and space to rest, to recover from the effects of heat. And yet we've seen a couple states, Texas and Florida in particular,
It's like Florida.
where the cities in those states tried to pass heat protections for workers. And the state legislatures and the Republican governors said, no, you can't do that. We're also saying, again, that's why we need a federal standard, because every single worker in this country should understand that when it comes to workers' rights, someone's got their back.
Yeah, which is probably why you recently did a social media blitz with Congressman Maxwell Frost, who we have also had on this show. And the audience might remember Congressman Frost as the youngest congressman in the American history, but also as the congressman from Florida, which is definitely dealing with some massive heat problems, but also massive government problems where they say, no, you can't take a break during the day. I don't care if you're falling off the job site. I don't care if you're dehydrated. You're staying working. And with that in mind, it seems like you and the congressman did a series of public service announcements about extreme heat in general. And if people don't know, extreme heat has actually been killing more people these days than floods and tornadoes and hurricanes combined. So much so that the Department of Labor has recently proposed, as Secretary Sue is saying, this rule that requires employers to take measures to protect their workers from this kind of heat, which is essential in places like Florida and Texas, right? That get so hot because our current rules basically favor corporate profits and letting workers fry on job sites. And as you've so smartly said, no job should be a death sentence, right? Like we are punishing people that like, I can't afford to complain. I can't afford to lose this job. I'll keep working. And they're actually dying doing that. Every worker should be coming home, like you're saying, safely at the end of the workday. They should be being paid properly. They should be treated with respect. And I think things like this proposed heat rule really make that a reality.
That's absolutely right. And I love Congressman Frost, and you're absolutely right. I was with him in his district recently where one of the things we did was sit down with workers to tell us about what was happening in, this is for outdoor workers like construction workers and letter carriers and farm workers, but it's also for indoor workers. Heat is a problem for people who work in kitchens, people who work in factories and in warehouses. And so our rule would also protect them. And it's just horrible how workers feel like they have to choose between their livelihood, right, making a living, and their lives, right, staying alive. That should simply never be the case. And so just really, again, love Congressman Frost and how much he raises his voice in a place where workers might be hearing an opposite message. I was also in Arizona also talking about heat, and there was a worker who cleans airplanes, a cabin cleaner, and she talked about how she is so desperate for water, a drink of water when she's cleaning. And she said it shouldn't take courage to take a sip of water. That is 100% right.
Yeah.
And then there was a flight attendant in that same meeting who said that sometimes she tries to leave water for the people who come in to clean because she knows that it's going to be too hot for them. That is real worker solidarity right there, right?
Yeah.
But it also just shouldn't require people having to do that because they expect that workers are going to have to endure conditions that no one should have to endure.
Okay, so getting older is no joke. I took some pictures with younger creators at the convention, and it was hard not to see my eye crinkles and my fine lines and my wrinkles. At least today's sponsor has my back. Look, I can't get too exercised about aesthetics, but I do want to keep my skin as healthy as possible as I get older. Did you know your body starts accumulating senescent cells, also called zombie cells, as early as your 20s? These little zombies stop producing collagen and hyaluronic acid like they used to, and they start secreting an inflammatory substance that makes the neighboring cells dysfunctional as well. But there's an answer for this, and it comes from our friends at OneSkin. Founded by an all-woman team of scientists, OneSkin is the first and only skin longevity company to target cellular sentience, a key hallmark of aging, with their proprietary OS1 peptide. OS1 is scientifically proven to decrease lines and wrinkles, boost hydration, and help with thinning skin that often comes with age. There's a reason they have over 4,000 five-star reviews for their full line of face, body, sun, and travel-size products. Treating symptoms rather than the root cause of aging has long been the norm. Most skincare on the market is designed to provide a temporary reduction in visible signs of aging, addressing the surface symptoms rather than the underlying decline in skin health. OneSkin, on the other hand, believes the purpose of skincare is not just to improve how we look, but to optimize our skin's biology so that it's more resilient to the aging process. It's next-level skincare. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. So get started today with 15% off using the code PoliticsGirl at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with the code PoliticsGirl. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you how you heard about them. And please support the show and tell them that we sent you. I don't know about you, but I never really see January as the beginning of the new year. For me, I still see September and back to school as the new year. And going into this new year, I want to be better with my finances. Did you know that Rocket Money customizes budgets to help you better understand your finances and stay on track to meet your goals? Did you know that Rocket Money can help you track your spending habits better than you were before you had the app? Did you know that Rocket Money can help negotiate your bills so they're lower? How many transaction a month do you make? I had no clue, and I was shocked to learn that the average US consumer makes an average of 70 payments per month. Keeping track of our spending can be overwhelming, which is where Rocket Money comes in. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that empowers you to save more, spend less, and take control of your financial life. Can you tell me exactly how much you spent on food last month? How about entertainment or travel? Probably not. I couldn't, but Rocket Money can. Rocket Money categorizes all of your expenses and helps you set a budget for different categories like bills and utilities, dining and drinking, travel, vacation, entertainment. With Rocket Money, you can know exactly where your money is going. It can also help you set up a custom budget by identifying top spending categories and suggesting areas where you can adjust your habits. They can calculate your monthly spending allowance and alert you when you're close to going over your budget. They also have a feature that automatically saves money for you, so you don't even have to think about it. Whether your goal is to pay off a credit card, save money for a house, or just save your money, Rocket Money makes it way easier. Which is probably why Rocket Money has over 5 million happy members and saves its users over $1 billion across its app's features. So Rocket Money helps you reach your financial goals faster. Go to Rocket Money at rocketmoney.com/politicsgirl. That's rocketmoney.com/politicsgirl. rocketmoney.com/politicsgirl. I love that Smalls is sponsoring our show. Not just because Smalls is a cat food with protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients that you could find in your fridge, delivered right to your door, but because paying attention to the cats and the owners that love them right now when the far right is attacking cat owners, particularly cat-owning women, just makes me happy. I love cats. I don't have a cat, but there are 2 beautiful cats that live across the street that my husband often ends up feeding, and their food was kind of gross, so we got them Smalls. Now, not only are the cats happy, Sean's friend is happy because his cat food no longer smells. If you have cats, you know how cat food can be. But there is a reason veterinarians.org rates Smalls 10 out of 10 for ingredient quality. These cute kitties that live in our house are actually descended from ferocious desert cats who hunted prey for food, and your cat isn't any different. They need fresh protein-packed meals to be at their best. Cat food companies and brands know this, but they choose to put profit first. They fill their food with mysterious meat byproducts and artificial flavoring and preservatives with names I don't even want to try and pronounce. And then we force our beloved pets to eat that garbage every day. which is probably why owners who have switched to Smalls reported an 88% overall health improvement in their cats. 88%. That's a big deal. In fact, Smalls is so confident your cat will love their product that you can try it risk-free. That means they will refund your money if your cat won't eat their food. So maybe now is the time to make the switch to Smalls. Head to smalls.com/politicsgirl and use the promo code politicsgirl at checkout for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's the best offer you'll find, but you have to use our code politicsgirl for the 50% off your first order. One last time, that is promo code politicsgirl for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Let's go, cat people. We've got your back. And speaking of eating well, I usually only eat a proper meal at dinner. But as I was saying with Heather Cox Richardson last week, being at the Democratic Convention was something else. Sean and I were both so glad to have mosh bars in our bag. We needed something in our body to keep our brains functioning, but one cannot live on popcorn alone. The thing is, the older I get, the more intentional I try to be about the way I eat and take care of my body. But sometimes things just get away from you, so I'm glad I'm a Mosh fan. You might have heard of Mosh on Shark Tank. Mosh is a company founded by Maria Shriver and her son Patrick Schwarzenegger with a simple mission: to create a conversation about brain health through food, education, and research. Mosh joined forces with the world's top scientists and functional nutritionists to make something beyond your average protein bar. With 10 delicious flavors, including 3 that are plant-based, each Mosh bar is made with ingredients that support brain health, like lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s. And now Mosh bars come with a new look and formulation, featuring the first and only brain-boosted Cognizin, a premium neurotropic that supplies the brain with a patented form of acetylcholine. So in normal people speak, those are brain boosters. And here's the best part. Mosh donates a portion of all the proceeds from your order to fund gender-based brain health research through the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, and Mosh is working closely to close that gap between men and women's health research. I'm always going on and on about their lemon and white chocolate flavor, but you really can't go wrong with any of them. So if you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and brain, Mosh bars are the perfect choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/politicsgirl to save 20% off plus free shipping on either the Best Sellers trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the Best Sellers or plant-based trial pack at moshlifE.com/politicsgirl. Thank you, Mosh, for continuing to sponsor the Politics Girl podcast. Now, back to Secretary Sue.
They expect that workers are going to have to endure conditions that no one should have to endure.
Yeah, and that is just not acceptable, especially in a country like America. Absolutely not. And if we're talking about someone like Congressman Frost, we're basically talking about the youth. And we're talking about the youth that understand things like climate change, but also just young people and what their job future looks like. I know that we were talking earlier that you have this segment of the Department of Labor called the Job Corps. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that's based around the youth, isn't it?
It is. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked about that because Job Corps is celebrating 60 years right now as we speak. So happy birthday to Job Corps.
Happy birthday, Job Corps.
It is a program that has served about 3 million young people over 120 Job Corps sites over the last 6 decades. And it is the largest residential program in this country for young people. Many of them are talented, they're hungry, they want to contribute in their communities, but for whatever reason, they need a little support in doing that. And so Job Corps allows them to live on site where they are learning a skill and learning about opportunity. And in this administration, because we are so focused on good jobs for all, we have named Job Corps centers infrastructure academies. That means that we are training young people for jobs on the hundreds of thousands of infrastructure projects that are breaking ground all across America due to the president's Investing in America agenda. So we are training young people on doing carpentry, on welding, on doing drywall, on keeping themselves safe in doing all of this work. And it's amazing. I visited Job Corps sites where you have young people who felt like the world had given up on them, felt like they'd maybe done something wrong and now they were going to be paying for it for the rest of their lives. Like, that's just not the country we live in, right? Everybody deserves a second shot and everyone has something to contribute, and we need to create the opportunities for them to do that. And, I met young people who, for example, they got to a Job Corps program and they felt like they would never be able to do public speaking. And by the end of the program, they are the class president. And so just seeing how Job Corps is opening up opportunities for individuals to get good jobs. The other thing is you can't do a job if you don't know that job exists, right? And we want opportunity to be widely available, not just to people who have the right connections, not just to people who were born in the right zip codes. And so programs like Job Corps, but also a whole set of youth-focused programs that we've had in this administration are really intended to make sure that young people see themselves with real opportunity and a real shot to get a good job in their community, whether they want to go to a four-year college or not.
Yeah. I mean, also ultimately you're empowering these students because good jobs, as we both know, change lives. And, that you don't know. Half the time you don't know. When you're growing up, you're like, I guess I'll be a teacher or I'll do what my dad does. Like you don't know what jobs are out there. So you end up, undervaluing yourself. And I think you're what you're doing is preparing people to fill out the workplace of both the future and the jobs that are available right now. So if you were a young person and you were hearing that, where would can they just go to the website Job Corps and get involved there?
They definitely can do that. They can find out through Job Corps. We're also trying to do more to connect educational institutions with these opportunities that we're creating, right? Because one of the things that I heard from young people while traveling is that many of them are told that, either you go to a four-year college or you do something like a fallback option.
Yeah.
And good jobs are not fallback options, right? They're real options. And so we're also trying to, I'm working with my colleague, the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, to make sure that young people are hearing through the communities that they're in, right? Through their counselors, through their teachers, that someone who has a great deal of promise because they like to work with their hands, for example, right? They're good at solving puzzles. They want to fix things, that there are tremendous opportunities for them to do that as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was looking through the Job Corps website and I was like, this is so cool because you're taking these people that have often been overlooked and you're partnering them with employers and you're giving them the skills that they can have so they're ready and trained to go out and work in the job force. And then that only does better by our society. I mean, the more people that are working in good jobs, the more taxes we have. Like if you want to look at it as an economy thing, it's a smart move. But while we're on the topic of young people, it seems like young people are very interested in unions these days. And I was just looking at a statistic that said 73% of Gen Z, which is the newest generation entering the job market, have really pro-union views, right? They seem to think, rightly so, I believe, that unions are essential to protecting their rights and improving their working conditions. And we should note that this is a higher level of support than any previous generation at the same age. I think, and tell me what you think of this, but I think it's because younger generations have watched their parents' generations struggling and they're not as enamored with the idea of just being a good little worker bee and a cog in someone else's machine. They want respect. They want safe and good working conditions. They want to be paid fairly for their time and efforts. And it's sort of the same sentiment, I think, that sort of followed going back into the office after the pandemic, where a lot of people were like, I'm getting just as much work done from home, but I'm not commuting. I can be more with my kids. I'd like a more flexible work schedule. And it's a different way of looking at the work environment. You can still get so much accomplished. We can still be very productive. But unions in general and a different way of looking at the workforce is kind of what the youth are coming up. They're like, I don't want to do what you guys did. You all seem miserable and I don't want to be doing it. What do you think about that?
I mean, I do think unions are cool again, right?
Yeah, man.
And, we're also seeing it's all the things you said. It's young people having gone through some pretty traumatic years, right? I mean, young people who, I've got two kids, 23 and 21, the impacts of certainly COVID, but also of just massive inequality, right? Where, the gap between CEO pay and frontline worker pay is some like 300 times, right? It would take a worker a lifetime to make what the CEO can make in a year. I mean, none of that feels right. And
in a week.
People are focused in a way. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so young people are focused on that. And I think that's good. It's good for our economy. It's good for our country. They're active around it and they're making different demands in the workplace as a result. And they're also organizing, right? When you look at some of the campaigns to unionize in workplaces that many people thought would not happen, right? Their individual coffee shops, right? Their, jobs that many people thought were going to be temporary. So workers weren't going to take the risk and take on the responsibility of organizing. It is happening. And I think that is also partly because it's not an accident, right? It's a combination of, again, working people standing up for themselves in a moment in which workers were called essential and now want to be treated as essential. It's about unions who have, again, won big things in workplaces so that now, we're saying jobs should not just be about making a living and having enough to get by. It's about having enough health benefits so you can go to the doctor when you're sick and so can your kid. It's about not having to work 2 or 3 jobs. It's about knowing that you're going to be able to retire with some security, right? And I think young people are also seeing that. And I think leadership matters, right? Having a president who, as you said, was the first sitting president to walk a picket line. It should also be noted that Vice President Harris has also walked picket lines, right? These are leaders who are saying that being in a union is a good thing to do. For a long time, union was a bad word. Now in America, it is not. And I think all of those things are coming together to give young people a sense of hope and empowerment to say, we deserve better and we're going to make it better.
Absolutely. And I think also with what you were talking about this wealth inequality that we have going on right now, we see these people at the very top, these corporate overlords, these people that just make so extraordinary amounts of money that they can't even relate to the regular worker anymore. And it's like, how do you negotiate with that person? And there's the power of collective bargaining. There's a wonderful illustration that was done where a CEO is standing on top of a mountain of money and he's very high. And then there is a whole bunch of people kind of holding each other up. And there's a little union worker at the very top and they say, okay, now let's negotiate because now we're at the same level, right? Like you were always going to be so much ahead of me on top of your mountain of money. But if I stand on all these other people and we collectively come together, then I can meet you at your level. Solidarity. Yeah, I think that's so important. Now, obviously, as a member of the president's cabinet, which is an executive branch position, I imagine you can't weigh in on the campaign. But as an outsider, I feel that I can point out that there is such a contrast between the Biden administration, what it's done, what it continues to do, what the Democratic Party has done for workers and wants to do for workers moving forward, and what the Republican candidate and his party want to do and feel about labor. To what you can speak to, how do you see the status of the labor movement more broadly moving into this election season? Because, we're in September, we're going to move into November really fast. So if you are looking at the workers' rights in America, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I can't speak to the campaign in my official capacity, but I will say that one of the things about looking forward to, the options in this country right now is we don't have to guess about what the candidates are going to do. We can look back to what the last administration was like and what it was like for working people and what it was like for people of color and women and, communities that were so denigrated. We know what that record looks like. So on almost everything, right? Certainly on unions, right? The last administration told workers to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. Doesn't matter if you have boots or not. The last administration, was all about cutting the kinds of worker protections that we have worked to increase, right? We have spent the last 4 years expanding overtime pay for working people. We've spent it making sure that people who save for retirement their entire lives, that retirement savings should be secure. We're protecting workers who've been invisible for a long time, expanding protections for farm workers and mine workers. The last administration cut all of those things back. I mean, the other thing is we started this conversation talking about the need for good jobs. The last administration promised an infrastructure week. I mean, I don't know what they thought a week would do, but a week, even that never materialized. This administration has invested billions of dollars in real infrastructure projects. So many that we're frankly having a hard time counting the number of projects that have broken ground. And that when I travel the country and visit union halls and sit down with working people and talk about opportunity, Job Corps, infrastructure academies, apprenticeship programs. Those are all like they're buzzing, they're bursting at the seams because of investments that are now being made. So we don't have to guess what what's going to happen. We can either decide to keep on moving forward with this progress that we've made, including in the numbers of jobs and the kinds of jobs, right? It's not just the numbers of jobs that matter. It's the quality of those jobs. It's that jobs should uplift a family, uplift an entire community. I just came back from Lordstown, Ohio, where in the last administration, the primary employer was shut down during that time. The administration did nothing about it. Now, it's coming back, and it's coming back with a battery manufacturing facility that's going to help power this country as the creators of our electric vehicle future, right? I mean, talking to people who many years ago had to leave the community in order to get a job, many of them leaving their families behind, are now back. And so we know what it was like before. We cannot go back to that. We can't go back to, someone who, denies science and does nothing in the face of a raging pandemic. We have to make sure that we continue to, look forward. And we believe that the work that we've done, we're just getting started, right? There's a lot to do to reverse decades of underinvestment in American industry, underinvestment in America's workers. And we're on the right track, and we've got more to do.
Yeah, it's about continuing the progress. I keep thinking about returning to aspects of the Build Back Better bill that Biden suggested right at the beginning of his first year of his presidency, and things that were taken out, like paid family leave. That will be coming back if we get another Democratic administration. And this idea that America can't afford paid family leave is also just insane. 141 countries offer leave. 41 of those are paid. Most rich countries in the world offer a minimum of 12 weeks, 20 offer a year of paid leave. We are desperately out of step with our peer nations in this department. And these are things that can come back because they've already been suggested by the Democrats. And 100%. I just think we have to be so careful about what we're offering ourselves. I mean, if we start taking away regulations, which is part of the big thing with the Republicans want, we're talking about taking away things like OSHA, things that protect you on your workforce. We're talking about more workers dying of heat exposure. We're talking about these kind of things. I mean, union leaders all over the country have called Trump a scab because he is, and he wants to union bust. And some of his biggest billionaire backers are union busters themselves. So I think we just have to be really serious about what the two options are. And as a working person in America, which party is working better for you? So I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Secretary. You're clearly doing such important work for the American people and the American worker. So please tell people how they can follow your work, but also the work of the Department of Labor as you guys continue to provide access to sort of high quality, good paying jobs, but also looking out for the American worker. If they have a question, if they feel they're not being treated right in the workforce, if they feel like my health insurance should cover this, why isn't it? That you guys are there for them. How do they reach out to you? How do they follow your work?
Thank you so much. So obviously, follow us. Our website is dol.gov. In fact, if you go on it, one of the first things you will see are, if you want to join a union, here's some information about what a union can do for you, right?
Yeah.
We also have worker.gov. You mentioned that earlier, which helps to lay out for working people resources, protections, how to report violations. We also have an employer.gov because good employers, right, who know that the best investment they can make is an investment in their workers, are really critical to this picture of a strong economy in which working people do well. And of course, follow us on social media, right? @Sec Julie Sue and DOL. We're active on social media. And so you can see what we're doing all around the country to protect working people, to help support workers in realizing and exercising their power and making sure that every job is a good job.
Yeah. I mean, honest to God, listening to you reminds me of something that I have in my book, which is coming out in September. It's called A Return to Common Sense. And it's this basic fundamental idea that government should be a force for good, that in the wrong hands, government can be useless and it can be greedy and we can be all disappointed in it. But in the right hands, government can really help people. And that's what we should be remembering when we go to vote, when we choose our leaders, when we look at legislation. I always say that we need people in government who want to do the job, not just people who want to have the job. And ultimately your goal, and it seems the goal of your entire department, is to look out for both the American worker and the American employer. I think that they're both out there, right? And I don't think people realize that That's something our government is actually focusing on and responsible for. But I hope that after listening to you speak today and having this conversation, they recognize the importance of hiring the right people for these roles or hiring the right president to fill these roles, because it really does end up serving all of us. So thank you so much for joining us. Happy Labor Day, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. I loved our conversation.
Me too. So that was the Department of Labor's Acting Secretary, Julie Su, reminding us that the Biden administration has been focused on building what they call the high road to the American dream. That it's not just about working, it's about being paid properly and treated with respect. And at the end of the day, giving us what President Biden calls a little breathing room to live our lives. Our government agencies, if run by the right people with the right motivation, are out here working for us. There are so many programs and agencies ready and willing to help our citizens, and most people don't even know about them. I want to thank Secretary Su for joining us today, and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now let's work to get the Democrats elected right across the country this November and keep the respect they have for the American worker moving forward, because the job is far from being done. Until next week, happy Labor Day. PG out. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, in partnership with the Meidas Media Network, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.